The words that would change everything came 5:47 a.m. Spoken by a security guard who had no idea he was about to humiliate the most dangerous woman in North America. "That's a fake ID," Tommy Martinez declared, his voice echoing across the pre-dawn silence at Blackwater Ridge Military Installation. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside," Martinez said, his voice carrying that particular authority of someone who'd caught countless people trying to breach military security with fake credentials. "This ID is bogus. The holographic seal is all wrong, and frankly, no offense. But you don't exactly look like someone with level 9 clearance." Dr. Elena Nakamura stood quietly in the Arizona desert morning, her slight frame dwarfed by the towering razor wire and concrete barriers that protected America's most classified aerospace research facility. At barely 5'3", wearing an oversized cardigan and carrying a canvas tote bag decorated with cartoon cats, she looked more like a librarian running errands than someone authorized to access the nation's most sensitive military secrets. The ID scanner beeped red again. Then again. "Look, lady," Martinez continued, his patience wearing thin as the line of authorized personnel began forming behind her. "I've been working security here for 8 years. I know what real level 9 clearance looks like, and this ain't it. Level 9 is for people like Defense Secretary William Chun, Joint Chiefs members. Maybe a handful of Pentagon brass, ... He gestured vaguely at her appearance, taking in the worn sneakers, the coffee-stained cardigan, and the Hello Kitty keychain dangling from her tote bag. "Not elementary school teachers or whoever you're supposed to be." Behind Elena, Major Sarah Rodriguez checked her watch impatiently. Captain James Thompson tapped his foot, already running late for the morning briefing. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Jang shifted his weight from foot to foot, wondering why base security was wasting everyone's time with what was obviously some civilian who'd stumbled into the wrong facility with a poorly forged ID. They all assumed the same thing. This small, quiet woman was either lost, confused, or running some kind of amateur scam. None of them could imagine that in less than 4 hours, she would be the only person standing between America and the greatest national security crisis in 50 years. None of them suspected that the innocent-looking woman with the cartoon keychain had designed half the weapon systems protecting the facility they were trying to enter. They didn't know that her fake ID was actually so highly classified that most base security personnel weren't authorized to verify its authenticity. Most critically, they had no idea that Dr. Elena Nakamura wasn't some random civilian with a forged credential. She was the director of Advanced Quantum Defense Projects, a position so secret that fewer than 12 people in the entire U.S. government knew it existed. "I understand your concern," Elena said softly, her voice carrying just a hint of an accent that suggested English hadn't always been her first language. "Perhaps you could contact Base Commander Patricia Morrison. I believe she's expecting me." Martinez snorted. "Right, like Commander Morrison is expecting some random lady with a fake level 9. Look, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but what exactly seems to be the problem here, Sergeant Martinez? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." The voice that cut through the morning air carried the kind of authority that made seasoned military personnel snap to attention without thinking. Commander Patricia Morrison approached the checkpoint, her stride purposeful, her expression already shifting from mild curiosity to something approaching alarm as she recognized the woman. At the center of the commotion, Morrison was a 47-year-old career military officer who'd commanded 3 different classified installations, and had personally briefed 4 presidents on matters of national security. She was not easily impressed, rarely surprised, and never, ever intimidated. But as she looked at the small woman with the cartoon keychain standing patiently at her security checkpoint, her face went completely pale. "Commander," Martinez said, relief evident in his voice. "This woman is trying to enter the facility with an obviously fake level 9 clearance. The scanner won't read it, the holographics look wrong, and honestly, she just doesn't seem like." His voice trailed off as he noticed the expression on Commander Morrison's face. It wasn't the look of someone about to back up her security personnel's decision. It was the look of someone who just realized that her facility's security had potentially committed a catastrophic error. Morrison stepped closer to Elena, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Dr. Nakamura? Why didn't you use the executive entrance? Your arrival wasn't supposed to be." "Plans changed," Elena replied simply. "The situation has escalated more rapidly than we anticipated. I needed to arrive immediately, and this was faster than waiting for the security protocols to be updated." Morrison's face went from pale to ashen. She turned to Martinez, her voice carrying the kind of controlled fury that made grown men reconsider their life choices. "Sergeant Martinez, you are currently preventing the entry of someone with level 9 quantum clearance. Classification level, that is 3 steps above my own authorization level. Dr. Nakamura doesn't just have the highest security clearance in the United States military. She has clearance that supersedes the Joint Chiefs, the Secretary of Defense, and everyone except the President himself." Martinez stared at Elena, then at the ID in his hand, then back at Commander Morrison. But she looks like ... double quotes. Like what, Sergeant?" Morrison's voice could have cut steel. "Like someone who doesn't belong here. Like someone who couldn't possibly be one of the most brilliant minds in quantum physics and advanced weapons development. Like someone whose work has prevented more terrorist attacks than the entire Department of Homeland Security combined." The line of military personnel behind Elena had gone completely silent. Major Rodriguez found herself staring at the small woman with new eyes, suddenly noticing details she'd missed before. The way Elena stood perfectly balanced, alert but not anxious, like someone accustomed to being in control even when appearing powerless. The fact that despite being publicly questioned and essentially accused of fraud, she showed no signs of stress, anger, or even mild irritation. Captain Thompson realized that the woman's canvas tote bag, which he'd assumed contained lunch and personal items, was actually positioned for quick access to its contents. Her stance, which had seemed casual, was actually textbook positioning for someone trained in personal protection, but it was Lieutenant Colonel Zhang who noticed the most telling detail of all: the small, almost invisible scar along Elena's left temple. The kind that came from shrapnel or flying debris. The kind that suggested this quiet woman had been much closer to combat situations than her appearance suggested. Furthermore, Commander Morrison continued, her voice rising slightly, "Dr. Nakamura isn't just here for a routine visit. She's here because as of 0400 hours this morning, this facility is under the highest possible threat level. Every minute we delay her entry is a minute closer to potential catastrophe." Elena finally spoke, her voice still soft but carrying an undertone that made everyone present suddenly understand they were in the presence of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected millions of lives. "Commander Morrison, if I may suggest, perhaps we could continue this conversation inside. Time is becoming a critical factor." Morrison nodded immediately. "Of course. Sergeant Martinez, Dr. Nakamura has immediate and unlimited access to every area of this facility. No questions, no delays, no additional verification. Anyone who impedes her movement or questions her authority will answer directly to me. And trust me, that's a conversation you don't want to have." As Elena walked through the checkpoint, her Hello Kitty keychain swaying gently with each step, the assembled military personnel watched with the growing realization that they had just witnessed something extraordinary. They'd all made the same fundamental error. They'd looked at Dr. Elena Nakamura and seen what they expected to see, rather than what was actually standing in front of them. None of them yet understood that this quiet woman with the cartoon accessories was about to save all their lives. But they were beginning to suspect that nothing about this morning was going to unfold the way they'd expected. The red scanner light that had seemed so definitive just moments before now felt like a warning of how badly they'd all miscalculated. And Elena Nakamura, walking steadily toward the facility that contained America's most dangerous secrets, was about to prove that the most powerful people are often the ones you never see coming. As Elena Nakamura walked through the corridors of Blackwater Ridge, her soft-soled sneakers made almost no sound against the polished concrete floors. The fluorescent lights overhead cast harsh shadows that seemed to emphasize everything about her that didn't belong in a place designed for warriors and weapons. Her cardigan, a faded burgundy color that had seen too many washing cycles, hung loosely on her small frame. The fabric had pulled slightly at the elbows, and there was a small coffee stain near the left pocket that she'd apparently given up trying to remove. Underneath, she wore a simple white blouse that looked like it came from a department store clearance rack, paired with dark slacks that were practical rather than fashionable. The Hello Kitty keychain wasn't her only concession to whimsy. Her canvas tote bag, now that people were looking more closely, featured a cheerful pattern of cartoon cats in various poses, sleeping, playing, chasing butterflies. It was the kind of bag an elementary school teacher might carry, filled with colored pencils and sticker rewards for well-behaved students. Her hair, straight and black with hints of premature gray at the temples, was pulled back in a simple ponytail secured with what appeared to be a rubber band rather than anything more sophisticated. No makeup, no jewelry except for a simple digital watch with a cracked face that looked like it had survived several encounters with hard surfaces. Major Sarah Rodriguez, walking 3 steps behind Elena as they moved through the facility, found herself cataloging these details with growing confusion. This was supposed to be one of America's most important defense contractors, the woman who commanded higher clearance than generals and cabinet members. Elena looked like someone's favorite aunt, the one who brought homemade cookies to family gatherings and knitted scarves for Christmas presents. She had the soft, rounded features of someone who'd never seen combat, never made life or death decisions, never commanded respect through anything more intimidating than maybe giving disappointing looks to misbehaving children. Dr. Nakamura, Rodriguez ventured as they passed a group of Air Force technicians who stopped their conversation to stare. I have to ask ... Your background, it's not what any of us expected for someone with your level of clearance. Elena glanced back with a gentle smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. What were you expecting, Major? Honestly? Someone more ... imposing. Someone who looked like they'd graduated from West Point. Maybe had combat experience, definitely someone taller. Rodriguez felt foolish saying it, but the contrast was too stark to ignore. You look like you should be teaching kindergarten, not designing weapon systems. I did teach kindergarten, Elena replied matter-of-factly, adjusting the strap of her cartoon cat bag. For 2 years, right after graduate school. It was some of the most valuable experience I've ever had. Captain James Thompson, who'd been listening to the conversation, nearly stumbled. You were a kindergarten teacher? Children are remarkably honest about what works and what doesn't, Elena explained, her voice carrying the patient tone of someone accustomed to explaining complex concepts in simple terms. They can spot a design flaw in a toy from across the room. Very useful for someone who builds things that need to function perfectly under stress. The group of technicians they'd passed were now openly whispering among themselves. Elena caught fragments of their conversation as they walked by. Looks like my grandmother. Level 9 clearance, really? Probably couldn't lift a rifle if she had to. Their assumptions weren't entirely unfair. Elena stood barely 5'3" in her sneakers, and couldn't have weighed more than 115 pounds soaking wet. Her hands were small and delicate, with short, practical nails and skin that suggested more time spent with books than with tools. She moved with a careful, measured pace that seemed more concerned with avoiding obstacles than with projecting authority. When they passed the bases, fitness center, Elena peered through the glass windows with obvious curiosity rather than familiarity. Inside, Marines were running through combat training drills, their movements sharp and aggressive. Elena watched them with the fascination of someone observing a foreign ritual. Her head tilted slightly like a bird studying something particularly interesting. "Have you ever—" Thompson started, then stopped himself. "Ever what, Captain? Ever been in a combat situation? I mean, given your clearance level, I assume you've at least had weapons training?" Elena's smile became slightly mysterious. "I've had various types of training over the years. Some more comprehensive than others." It was the kind of non-answer that technically addressed the question while revealing absolutely nothing. But her tone suggested that weapons training might have been covered in the same gentle, patient manner as everything else about her, like someone who'd learned to shoot the way normal people learn to knit. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Jang had been studying Elena's body language since they'd started walking. As someone with extensive experience in psychological operations, he was trained to read people, to spot inconsistencies between appearance and reality. But Elena Nakamura was giving him nothing to work with. She seemed genuinely comfortable in her own skin, unbothered by the stares and whispers following their group through the facility. There was no defensiveness in her posture, no attempt to compensate for her unimposing appearance with aggressive body language or sharp words. She simply existed in her space with the quiet confidence of someone who'd never had to prove herself to anyone. "Dr. Nakamura," Zhang said, "I have to admit, your appearance is unexpected for someone in your position. Have you found that creates challenges in your work?" Elena considered the question seriously. "People see what they expect to see, Colonel. Sometimes that's useful. Useful how? Well, for instance, right now everyone in this facility is trying to figure out how someone who looks like a retired librarian ended up with the highest security clearance in the country. They're so focused on that puzzle that they're not asking the more important questions." "Which are?" Elena's smile widened slightly, and for just a moment, Zhang caught a glimpse of something sharp behind her gentle exterior. "Like why someone with my clearance level would arrive at this facility without advance notice. Why Commander Morrison looked terrified when she saw me. And why everyone keeps mentioning that time as a critical factor." The observation hit like a cold splash of water. Rodriguez, Thompson, and Zhang all realized simultaneously that they'd been so distracted by Elena's appearance that they'd completely missed the underlying crisis that had brought her here. As they approached the main laboratory complex, Elena paused to adjust her cardigan, a gesture so mundane and domestic that it reinforced every assumption about her harmless nature. But she also used the moment to scan the corridor ahead with what Zhang now recognized as systematic efficiency, her eyes cataloging exits, personnel, and potential security concerns in a pattern that suggested extensive training and threat assessment. The contradiction was subtle but unmistakable. Elena Nakamura looked like someone's favorite aunt, moved like a visiting professor, and spoke like a kindergarten teacher. But she observed her environment like someone who'd survived situations where missing details could be fatal. "Shall we continue?" Elena asked pleasantly, shouldering her cartoon cat bag. "I believe we're expected in Laboratory 7, and I really would prefer not to keep Dr. Richardson waiting." As they resumed walking, The three military officers found themselves dealing with an uncomfortable cognitive dissonance. Everything about Elena suggested harmlessness, domesticity, and gentle competence in civilian matters. But there were tiny inconsistencies, barely perceptible details that didn't quite fit the image of a former kindergarten teacher who'd somehow stumbled into the highest levels of government clearance. None of them yet understood that Elena's appearance wasn't accidental. It was carefully constructed, deliberately maintained, and strategically deployed. They were looking at someone who'd spent years perfecting the art of being underestimated. And they were falling for it completely, but in a few hours. When the crisis that had brought Elena to Blackwater Ridge reached its peak, they would discover that the most dangerous people are often the ones who look the least threatening. They would learn that brilliance doesn't always announce itself with fanfare, and that the fate of nations sometimes rests in the hands of someone who looks like they should be baking cookies rather than preventing wars. For now, though Elena remained exactly what she appeared to be, a small, quiet woman with a cartoon keychain and a gentle smile, walking through a military facility like a civilian who'd accidentally wandered into the wrong building. The illusion was perfect, and it was about to save everyone's lives. The first sign that Elena Nakamura wasn't exactly what she appeared to be came when they reached Laboratory 7's biometric scanner. Major Rodriguez watched as Elena approached the device, a cutting-edge retinal scanner that required precise positioning and steady hands to function properly. Most civilians struggled with the technology. Even experienced military personnel often needed multiple attempts to align correctly with the scanner's requirements. Rodriguez had seen visiting scientists, defense contractors, and even Pentagon officials fumble with the device, requiring assistance from technicians to achieve a proper reading. Elena stepped up to the scanner and positioned herself with fluid precision, her movements economical and exact. Her eye aligned with the scanning mechanism on the first attempt, and she held perfectly still for the required 3-second duration without the micro-movements that typically caused reading failures. The scanner beeped once. Green light. Access granted to Quantum Research Division Level Alpha Priority. Huh, Thompson muttered. That usually takes people a few tries. Elena glanced back with her characteristic gentle smile. I've used similar systems before. But Rodriguez had been watching closely. Elena's positioning hadn't been the tentative approach of someone who'd used similar systems. It had been the automatic, muscle memory response of someone who'd used that exact type of scanner hundreds of times. Her body had moved with the kind of unconscious precision that came from extensive familiarity. As they entered the laboratory complex, Elena's behavior became even more intriguing. While maintaining her casual, slightly curious demeanor, she navigated the facility's layout with subtle efficiency. When they reached a corridor junction, Elena consistently chose the correct direction without hesitation. Despite supposedly being unfamiliar with the facility, Dr. Nakamura, Zhang said, testing his growing suspicion. Have you been to Blackwater Ridge before? Not to this specific facility, no, Elena replied, which was technically accurate while avoiding the real question. But Zhang noticed that Elena's eyes weren't scanning the environment with the confusion of someone in an unfamiliar place. Instead, she was conducting systematic threat assessments, her gaze automatically checking sight lines, identifying cover positions, and cataloging potential escape routes. It was subtle, barely perceptible, unless you knew what to look for, but it was there. Most telling of all was her reaction to the facility's various security measures. As they passed through checkpoint after checkpoint, Elena responded to each protocol with practiced ease. When a guard requested additional identification, she produced exactly the right documents in exactly the right order without fumbling or hesitation. When they encountered a locked corridor that required voice authentication, Elena provided the necessary clearance codes with matter-of-fact precision. Voice authentication accepted. Welcome, Dr. Nakamura. Clearance level quantum alpha. Access granted to all sections. Rodriguez felt a chill. Quantum alpha clearance was theoretical. She'd heard rumors that such a classification existed, but she'd never seen it in action. Elena had just casually provided authentication codes that were apparently above top secret classifications. Dr. Marcus Richardson, the facility's chief researcher, met them at the entrance to the main laboratory. A tall, thin man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and the distracted air of someone who spent more time with equations than people. Richardson approached their group with obvious relief. "Thank God you're here," he said to Elena, completely ignoring the military officers. "The situation has deteriorated faster than our worst-case projections. We're looking at potential cascade failure within 6 hours if we can't stabilize the quantum matrix." Elena nodded calmly. "Show me the current readings." Richardson led them to a bank of monitors displaying data that looked like incomprehensible streams of numbers and symbols to the military personnel. But Rodriguez watched Elena's face as she studied the information, and what she saw was unsettling. Elena wasn't reading the data with the careful concentration of someone learning new information. She was scanning it with the rapid, automatic comprehension of someone who designed the systems producing those readings. Her eyes moved across the displays in patterns that suggested deep familiarity with every parameter being measured. "The fluctuation began at 0347 hours, Richardson explained, pointing to a specific graph. "We've tried every stabilization protocol in the manual, but the quantum field keeps destabilizing. Whatever's causing this, it's beyond our current understanding." Elena studied the data for perhaps 30 seconds, then reached into her cartoon cat tote bag. Rodriguez expected her to pull out reading glasses or a notebook. Instead, Elena withdrew a tablet computer that looked unlike anything Rodriguez had ever seen. The device was sleek, matte black, and completely unmarked except for a small biometric sensor. When Elena touched the sensor, the screen came alive with displays that made the laboratory's cutting-edge equipment look primitive by comparison. The interface showed real-time quantum field measurements, electromagnetic spectrum analysis, and what appeared to be predictive modeling algorithms running in the background. "This isn't a standard stabilization problem," Elena said, her fingers moving across the tablet surface with practiced efficiency. "Someone's introduced an external interference pattern designed to create exactly this type of cascade failure." Richardson stared at the tablet. "How are you getting readings that detailed? Our equipment can't measure quantum field variations at that resolution." Elena glanced up from her device. Different equipment has different capabilities. But what caught Zhang's attention wasn't Elena's mysterious tablet, it was her hands. As she worked with the device, he could see calluses on her fingertips that weren't consistent with keyboard use or laboratory work. They were the kind of calluses that came from handling textured materials under stress, from gripping objects tightly in situations where losing your hold could be catastrophic. More intriguingly, when Elena had reached into her bag for the tablet, Zhang had glimpsed something else inside, what appeared to be a small, military-grade communication device, and what might have been a compact toolkit designed for field operations rather than laboratory research. Elena's voice, too, was revealing subtle inconsistencies. While she maintained her gentle, professorial tone when speaking to the group, her technical discussions with Richardson carried undertones of absolute authority. She wasn't making suggestions or offering theories. She was issuing assessments with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the final word on complex technical matters. "Dr. Richardson," Elena said, still studying her tablet, "I need you to run a full spectrum analysis on the interference pattern. Focus on frequencies between 847.3 and 847.7 terahertz. You should find a modulated signal that doesn't match any natural phenomenon." Richardson's eyes widened. "How did you know to check that specific frequency range?" Elena's pause was almost imperceptible, but Zhang caught it. For just a moment, her carefully maintained persona slipped, and he saw a flash of someone calculating how much information to reveal. Experience with similar interference patterns, she said finally. But Richardson was already running the analysis, and his expression was changing from confusion to alarm. My God, you're right. There's a deliberate signal buried in that frequency range. This isn't equipment failure, someone's actively jamming our quantum field generators. Elena nodded, unsurprised. The question is whether this is a test of our defenses or the opening move in something larger. The casual way she said, our defenses made Rodriguez realize that Elena didn't consider herself a visitor to this facility. Despite her claims of unfamiliarity, she clearly regarded Blackwater Ridge's security as her responsibility. As Elena continued working with her mysterious tablet, Rodriguez noticed other details that didn't fit the image of a harmless academic. Elena's situational awareness was extraordinary. She tracked the movement of every person in the laboratory without appearing to pay attention to them. When a technician dropped a tool behind her, she identified the sound and location without turning around. Most telling of all was Elena's reaction when an alarm briefly sounded in an adjacent section of the facility. While everyone else looked around in confusion, Elena's hand moved in an automatic gesture toward her hip, as if reaching for something that should have been there. The movement was so quick and unconscious that most people missed it entirely. But Zhang didn't miss it. He'd seen that exact gesture countless times from military personnel reaching for sidearms. Elena had just demonstrated a reflexive response that took years of training to develop. Dr. Nakamura, Zhang said carefully, your background is quite diverse. Kindergarten teacher, quantum physicist, and apparently experienced with high-level security protocols. That's an unusual combination of skills. Elena looked up from her tablet, her expression pleasant and completely unrevealing. I've always believed in lifelong learning, Colonel. You never know when different experiences might prove useful. It was another non-answer that technically addressed his question while revealing nothing. But the pattern was becoming clear. Elena Nakamura had far more training and experience than her appearance suggested. And she was very good at deflecting questions about the specifics of that background. Richardson finished his analysis and turned to Elena with an expression of growing respect. Your frequency prediction was exactly correct. We're dealing with a sophisticated jamming signal that's specifically designed to destabilize our quantum research. Whoever's doing this has intimate knowledge of our systems. Elena saved her work on the mysterious tablet and returned it to her cartoon cat bag. Then we need to find out who has that level of access and why they're using it. Because if they can destabilize our research, they can probably do much worse. As she spoke, Elena's gentle tone carried an undertone of steel that made Rodriguez suddenly understand that they weren't just dealing with a brilliant scientist. They were dealing with someone who'd encountered hostile interference before and knew exactly how dangerous the situation could become. The kindergarten teacher with the Hello Kitty keychain was beginning to reveal depths that none of them had suspected. And Rodriguez was starting to wonder just what kind of lifelong learning had prepared Elena Nakamura for a moment like this. The morning briefing in Conference Room Alpha was where Elena Nakamura first experienced the full weight of institutional bias at Blackwater Ridge, despite her Level 9 clearance and Commander Morrison's explicit instructions. The assembled department heads treated her arrival like an unwelcome interruption to serious military business. Colonel Marcus Webb, the facility's operations director, had arranged the seating deliberately. Elena found herself directed to a chair at the far end of the conference table, physically separated from the core group of decision-makers. It was positioned near the wall-mounted display screens, the spot typically reserved for technical support staff or note-takers rather than primary participants. Dr. Nakamura, Webb said, without looking up from his briefing materials. "We appreciate you joining us, but I should mention that this discussion involves highly classified operational details. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable waiting in the visitor's lounge while we handle the security aspects." Elena settled into her assigned chair, adjusting her cardigan and placing her cartoon cat bag at her feet. "I'm comfortable staying, Colonel. Thank you for your concern." The dismissal in Webb's tone was unmistakable. Around the table, department heads exchanged glances that clearly communicated their shared assessment. Whatever Elena's supposed credentials, she didn't belong in a room where real decisions were made by serious people. Dr. Patricia Hendricks, the facility's senior weapons researcher, was more direct in her skepticism. Colonel Webb, with all due respect to Dr. Nakamura's educational background, shouldn't we limit this discussion to personnel with relevant military experience? We're dealing with potential hostile action, not theoretical academic research. "I have some familiarity with hostile action," Elena said mildly. But her comment was lost in the shuffle as Colonel Webb called the meeting to order. For the next 20 minutes, Elena sat quietly while the assembled officials discussed the quantum interference crisis. She listened as they proposed solutions that she knew wouldn't work, debated theories that were fundamentally flawed, and argued over response protocols that would actually make the situation worse. Major Sarah Rodriguez, sitting 3 seats away, watched Elena's face during these exchanges. The small woman maintained her pleasant expression throughout, occasionally jotting notes in a Hello Kitty notebook that looked like it belonged in a middle school classroom. But Rodriguez noticed that Elena's notes weren't random observations, they were systematic, technical corrections to every major point being discussed. "The jamming signal is clearly foreign in origin," declared General Harrison Foster, who joined the briefing via secure video link from the Pentagon. "Our intelligence suggests Chinese or Russian interference. We should prepare for conventional response protocols." Elena's pen paused over her notebook. She looked up as if to speak, then seemed to think better of it and returned to her notes. Colonel Webb noticed her movement. "Dr. Nakamura, did you have a comment? Some kind of educational perspective on the general's assessment?" The condescension in his voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Around the table, several participants smirked at what they perceived as Elena being put in her place. "Well," Elena said carefully, "the frequency modulation patterns don't actually match known foreign interference signatures. The mathematical structure suggests domestic technology being used in ways it wasn't designed for." General Foster's image on the screen frowned. "Dr. Nakamura, I appreciate your academic interest, but signals intelligence is outside your area of expertise. We have specialists for that analysis." "Of course," Elena replied, returning to her notebook without argument. But Dr. Richardson, who'd worked with Elena earlier, noticed something the others missed. Elena wasn't writing random notes, she was conducting real-time frequency analysis using calculations that would typically require sophisticated computer modeling. Her Hello Kitty notebook contained mathematical formulas that were several steps ahead of anything being discussed in the room. The meeting's tone became increasingly dismissive toward Elena as it progressed. When she attempted to point out a fundamental error in their quantum field analysis, Dr. Hendricks interrupted her. "I'm sorry, but quantum physics theories are quite different from practical applications in a military context. Perhaps you could save your questions for after we've addressed the immediate security concerns." Elena nodded politely and made another note in her cartoon notebook. Captain James Thompson, observing from his position near the door, found himself growing uncomfortable with the dynamic. Elena was being treated like an unwelcome student who'd wandered into a graduate seminar. Despite supposedly having higher clearance than anyone else in the room except General Foster, the breaking point came when Colonel Webb outlined the facility's proposed response plan. Elena listened as he described a protocol that would involve shutting down the quantum research entirely and evacuating all non-essential personnel. That approach would be catastrophic, Elena said quietly. The room fell silent. Webb's expression hardened. Excuse me? Shutting down the quantum generators while they're experiencing interference will create a feedback loop. Instead of containing the problem, you'll amplify it across the entire Western power grid. Dr. Hendricks leaned forward with barely concealed annoyance. Dr. Nakamura, I think you're misunderstanding the complexity of our systems. This isn't theoretical physics, it's real world. Application of technologies that require years of specialized training to understand. I understand that, Elena replied. But the mathematics are quite clear. If you initiate shutdown protocols now, you'll trigger exactly the kind of cascade failure that whoever's causing this interference wants to achieve. General Foster's voice cut through the conference room speakers with military authority. Dr. Nakamura, I appreciate your concerns, but we have engineers with decades of experience in these systems. Your kindergarten teaching background, while admirable, doesn't qualify you to second-guess military technical decisions. The comment landed like a physical blow. Around the table, Elena could see the relief on faces of people who'd been wondering how to politely exclude her from serious discussions. The general had given them permission to dismiss her entirely. Elena closed her Hello Kitty notebook and folded her hands in her lap. For a moment, her gentle expression seemed to flicker, and Townsend caught a glimpse of something much sharper underneath. Not hurt or embarrassment, but a kind of cold calculation. Of course, General. I certainly wouldn't want to overstep my qualifications. Colonel Webb seized the opportunity. Perhaps Dr. Nakamura would be more comfortable observing from the monitoring station. She could learn about our operations without interfering with the decision-making process. It was a diplomatic way of removing her from the room entirely. Elena gathered her bag and stood without argument. Thank you for including me, she said with genuine politeness. I hope your approach works out well. As Elena left the conference room, Major Rodriguez felt an unexpected surge of anger at what she'd just witnessed. Regardless of whether Elena's technical concerns were valid, the woman had been systematically humiliated and excluded based purely on assumptions about her appearance and background. But it was Lieutenant Colonel Zhang who noticed the most concerning detail. As Elena had stood to leave, he'd glimpsed her notebook when she closed it. The visible page contained mathematical calculations that he recognized from his own graduate work in theoretical physics equations that were far beyond anything typically taught at the undergraduate level, let alone in elementary education. That more troubling. Elena's calculations appeared to be predicting the exact type of cascade failure she'd warned about, complete with timeline projections and geographic impact assessments. Her Hello Kitty notebook contained analysis that belonged in a Pentagon situation room, not a children's classroom. After Elena left, the meeting continued with renewed confidence. Webb outlined shutdown protocols, Hendricks confirmed technical specifications, and General Foster approved the response plan. They proceeded with the comfortable certainty that they'd removed an unqualified civilian from a discussion requiring serious expertise. None of them considered the possibility that they'd just excluded the one person in the room who actually understood what they were facing. None of them suspected that Elena's polite acceptance of their dismissal was itself a strategic choice, made by someone who'd learned that sometimes the best way to protect people was to let them make their own mistakes while quietly preparing for the consequences. In the monitoring station where Elena had been relocated, she set up her mysterious tablet and began running calculations that the facility's supercomputers couldn't match. She worked with quiet efficiency, her cartoon cat bag open beside her chair, revealing glimpses of equipment that definitely hadn't come from any kindergarten classroom Elena Nakamura had just been systematically excluded from the decision-making process by people who considered her unqualified to understand the situation. In approximately 4 hours, when their response plan triggered exactly the cascade failure she'd predicted, they would discover that their assumptions about qualification and expertise had been more than wrong. They'd been potentially fatal. But for now, Elena worked alone in her assigned corner, quietly preparing to save the lives of people who'd just finished explaining why her opinion didn't matter. In the monitoring station's relative quiet, Elena Nakamura worked with methodical precision while the facility's leadership implemented their fatally flawed response plan 3 rooms away. Her mysterious tablet displayed readouts that seemed impossible real-time. Quantum field measurements from locations that Blackwater Ridge's sensors couldn't even access. Dr. Marcus Richardson found her there 20 minutes after the disastrous briefing, his expression troubled. As the facility's chief researcher, he'd been excluded from the final decision-making session, apparently deemed too academic for operational planning. The irony wasn't lost on him that he and Elena had both been marginalized by the same institutional bias. "Dr. Nakamura," he said, settling into a chair beside her workstation, "I've been thinking about your frequency analysis earlier. The precision of your predictions was unusual. That kind of accuracy typically requires years of experience with similar interference patterns." Elena glanced up from her tablet, her fingers never pausing in their rapid movement across the screen. Pattern recognition improves with exposure to different scenarios. It was another of her characteristically evasive answers, but Richardson pressed forward. "What scenarios?" "I mean, quantum interference jamming isn't exactly common in civilian research. Where would someone encounter enough examples to develop that level of predictive capability?" Elena's hands stilled for just a moment, a barely perceptible pause that Richardson almost missed. When she resumed typing, her voice carried a careful neutrality that suggested she was choosing her words with extreme care. "I've consulted on various projects over the years. Government work sometimes involves diverse challenges." "Government work," Richardson repeated slowly. "What kind of government work requires expertise in quantum interference patterns?" Elena saved her current analysis and leaned back in her chair, studying Richardson with eyes that seemed to be calculating exactly how much truth she could afford to reveal. For a moment, he glimpsed something behind her gentle exterior, a depth of experience that didn't match her academic persona. "Dr. Richardson, there are certain projects that don't appear in standard academic publications. Research that addresses very specific problems for very specific clients. Classified projects? Projects that require particular discretion, yes." Richardson felt like he was having a conversation in code, each exchange revealing fragments of a larger picture that Elena was deliberately keeping hidden. But the fragments were tantalizing. A former kindergarten teacher didn't develop expertise in classified government research by accident. Elena's tablet chimed softly, displaying what appeared to be satellite telemetry data. Richardson recognized some of the formatting. It matched classified intelligence briefings he'd seen during his own clearance reviews. But the data resolution was extraordinary, far beyond anything he'd encountered in standard government systems. "Dr. Nakamura, that satellite feed. How are you accessing real-time military intelligence?" Elena's expression remained pleasant, but her answer was even more carefully worded than before. "Sometimes different agencies share information when situations require coordinated response." "Which agencies?" "Ones that prefer not to be named in casual conversation." Richardson felt a chill. Elena wasn't just accessing classified information. She was accessing it with the casual familiarity of someone who'd been doing so for years. Her tablet wasn't receiving standard intelligence feeds. It was connected to systems that most government officials didn't even know existed. The door to the monitoring station opened, and Major Sarah Rodriguez entered with Captain James Thompson close behind. Both looked frustrated and concerned. Dr. Nakamura, Rodriguez said, "We need to ask you something, and we'd appreciate a straight answer. Your background doesn't add up. Kindergarten teachers don't have level 9 clearance. Former academics don't carry military-grade equipment in cartoon bags. And they definitely don't access satellite intelligence feeds from tablets that look like they were designed by aliens." Elena looked at the three people studying her with growing suspicion and seemed to reach some kind of internal decision. She closed her tablet and folded her hands in her lap, the gesture somehow transforming her from harmless academic to someone preparing for interrogation. "What would you like to know?" "Everything," Thompson said. "Starting with who you really are." Elena was quiet for a long moment, her gaze moving between their faces as if assessing how much truth they could handle. When she spoke, her voice carried undertones of authority that hadn't been there before. "My name is Elena Nakamura. I did teach kindergarten for 2 years after graduate school. Everything I've told you about my background is technically accurate." "Technically accurate," Rodriguez repeated. "What does that mean?" "It means I've told you the truth, but not all of it." Richardson leaned forward. "What parts did you leave out?" Elena reached into her cartoon cat bag and withdrew what appeared to be a second identification card. Unlike the cheerful level 9 clearance that had caused so much confusion at the gate, this one was matte black with minimal text and a holographic seal that seemed to shift and change as she moved it. "Before I was Dr. Elena Nakamura, quantum physicist and former kindergarten teacher. I was Agent Elena Nakamura, Special Projects Division, National Security Agency." The room fell completely silent. Rodriguez stared at the black identification card, recognizing some of the security features but not others. Thompson felt like the floor had shifted beneath his feet. Richardson was beginning to understand why Elena's technical knowledge had seemed so impossibly advanced. "An SA Special Projects," Rodriguez said carefully. "What kind of special projects?" "The kind that officially don't exist. The kind that address threats most people can't imagine and wouldn't believe if they could." Elena returned the black ID to her bag and pulled out another item, a small device that looked like a cross between a smartphone and a scientific instrument. When she activated it, the monitoring station's displays lit up with information that made Richardson gasp. "Real-time quantum field analysis from every major research facility in North America. Electromagnetic spectrum monitoring covering frequencies that civilian equipment couldn't even detect. Predictive modeling algorithms that were apparently tracking global infrastructure vulnerabilities in real time." "For 7 years," Elena continued, "I worked on projects that required expertise in theoretical physics, practical engineering, and what you might call unconventional problem solving. I specialized in quantum-based technologies that could be weaponized or turned against us." Thompson found his voice. "Weaponized quantum physics? Quantum interference can do more than jam research equipment, Captain. In the right circumstances, it can crash power grids, disable communication networks, or cause catastrophic failures in any system that relies on precise electromagnetic frequencies. Like, for instance, the guidance systems in modern aircraft, the control systems in nuclear power plants, or the networking infrastructure that connects global financial markets." The implications hit Rodriguez like a physical blow. "You're saying this interference at Blackwater Ridge isn't just targeting our research. I'm saying that what's happening here is a field test. Someone is using our facility to perfect techniques that could cripple entire nations." Elena activated another function on her device, and the display showed a map of North America with dozens of blinking red dots scattered across major population centers. "These are facilities with quantum-sensitive systems that could be targeted using refined versions of the interference pattern we're experiencing. Hospitals with quantum-enhanced medical equipment. Financial centers with quantum encryption systems. military installations with quantum radar and communication arrays. Richardson stared at the map in horror. How many people could be affected if someone successfully deployed this technology? Conservative estimate: 40 million people lose power within the first hour. Medical systems fail, financial markets crash, and military communication goes dark. Within 6 hours, you're looking at complete infrastructure collapse across the western United States. The monitoring station's displays suddenly flashed red, and alarms began sounding throughout the facility. Elena's device showed cascade failure warnings spreading across her real-time analysis as Blackwater Ridge's quantum systems began the shutdown sequence that Colonel Webb's team had just initiated. And that, Elena said, her voice carrying grim certainty, is about to begin happening right now. She stood up, her cartoon cat bag transforming from whimsical accessory to emergency equipment kit as she began pulling out devices that definitely hadn't come from any kindergarten classroom. Her gentle demeanor was shifting into something more focused and professional, not the transformation of a harmless academic into a secret agent, but the emergence of someone who'd been an agent all along. "Dr. Nakamura," Rodriguez said. "Or Agent Nakamura, or whoever you really are, can you stop this?" Elena looked at the cascade failure warnings spreading across her displays, then at the 3 people who'd just learned that their assumptions about her had been catastrophically wrong. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I'm about to find out if 7 years of preventing the unthinkable prepared me for the impossible." As alarms continued sounding throughout Blackwater Ridge, Elena Nakamura began revealing exactly what kind of lifelong learning had equipped her to face a crisis that could reshape the modern world. The kindergarten teacher with the "Hello Kitty" keychain was about to become the last line of defense against technological warfare that most people couldn't even comprehend. As cascade failure alarms echoed through Blackwater Ridge, Elena Nakamura stood frozen in the monitoring station, her hand hovering over the emergency protocols displayed on her tablet. For someone who just revealed herself as a former NSA special agent, her hesitation was unexpected and deeply troubling. Major Rodriguez watched Elena's face, seeing something she hadn't anticipated: fear. Not fear of the technological crisis unfolding around them, but fear of something internal. Something that was holding her back from taking action despite having the apparent capability to intervene. "Dr. Nakamura," Richardson said urgently, "the cascade failure is accelerating. If you have the ability to stop this, we need you to act now." Elena's fingers trembled slightly as she stared at her tablet's interface. The emergency intervention protocols were clearly displayed, waiting for her authorization. But instead of implementing them, she stepped back from the device as if it had become dangerous. "I can't," she said quietly. "Can't?" Thompson stepped forward, incredulous. "You just told us you spent 7 years preventing technological warfare. You have access to systems that can apparently counter this attack. What do you mean you can't?" Elena closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them, Rodriguez saw something that explained everything: guilt so profound it was physically painful to witness. "Because the last time I made this kind of decision, I killed 12 innocent people." The monitoring station fell silent except for the continuing alarms. Elena moved to the window overlooking the facility's main courtyard, where technicians were evacuating non-essential personnel in response to the crisis. Her reflection in the glass looked small and fragile, nothing like the confident agent she'd revealed herself to be moments before. 3 years ago, Elena began, her voice barely above a whisper, I was leading a joint task force investigating quantum interference attacks on civilian infrastructure. We'd tracked the source to a research facility in Eastern Europe, a converted university laboratory that appeared to be developing weapons-grade quantum disruption technology. She pressed her palm against the window, watching families hurry toward evacuation vehicles below. The intelligence was clear. The facility was operating under hostile government funding, developing technology that could cripple Western communication and power systems. We had authorization for immediate intervention, and I had the technical expertise to disable their quantum generators, remotely using exactly the kind of protocols I could implement here. Richardson felt dread settling in his stomach. What happened? I accessed their systems and initiated shut-down procedures designed to permanently disable their quantum research capability. The mathematics were perfect, the technical execution was flawless, and the strategic objective was achieved within 17 minutes. Elena's voice became even quieter, forcing the others to lean closer to hear her. What I didn't know was that the facility's basement level housed a children's daycare center for the university staff. What I didn't calculate was that quantum field collapse in an enclosed space creates electromagnetic pulse effects that can interfere with medical devices like pacemakers and insulin pumps. The implications hit Rodriguez like a physical blow. The children, 12 children died, not from the quantum field directly, but from medical device failures caused by the electromagnetic cascade I triggered. Children whose parents worked at the university, who had nothing to do with weapons research, who were just in the wrong place when I decided that technical precision was more important than understanding all the variables. Elena turned away from the window, her face pale but determined to finish the explanation. The investigation cleared me of wrongdoing. The intelligence had been accurate, the threat had been real, and the technical execution had been flawless. Command considered it an acceptable casualty rate for preventing a weapon that could have killed millions. But you didn't, Thompson said, beginning to understand. I resigned from active duty the day the investigation concluded. I couldn't accept that 12 children's lives were an acceptable cost for preventing theoretical future casualties. I couldn't live with the knowledge that my mathematical precision had been more important to me than human precision. Elena returned to her tablet, staring at the intervention protocols that could stop Blackwater Ridge's cascade failure. Her hand hovered over the activation sequence, but she couldn't bring herself to touch the screen. Every calculation I make now, I see their faces. Every time I'm tempted to implement emergency protocols, I remember that technical solutions have human consequences that equations can't predict. I became a kindergarten teacher because I wanted to build things instead of destroy them, to nurture life instead of risk it. Richardson understood now why Elena had been so reluctant to reveal her capabilities, why she'd accepted dismissal and exclusion rather than assert her authority. She wasn't hiding from professional embarrassment or personal pride. She was hiding from the responsibility of making decisions that could kill innocent people. Dr. Nakamura, Rodriguez said gently, the situation here is different. This is a military facility. Everyone present is trained personnel who understands the risks. Is it different? Elena asked, her voice sharp with pain. Are you certain there aren't contractors' children in the family housing area? Civilian technicians with medical devices? Pregnant women whose fetuses could be affected by electromagnetic pulses? How can I be sure that stopping this attack won't create exactly the kind of unintended casualties that haunt my dreams? The alarms grew louder as Blackwater Ridge's quantum systems continued their catastrophic failure. Elena's tablet showed expanding circles of cascade failure spreading beyond the facility's boundaries, beginning to affect civilian infrastructure in nearby communities. Because if you don't act, Thompson said, the casualties won't be unintended. They'll be exactly what whoever's behind this attack wanted to achieve. Elena stared at the expanding failure patterns on her screen. Her internal conflict was visible, the tension between her technical ability to intervene and her moral terror of causing unintended harm. She was trapped between action and inaction, between the deaths she might cause and the deaths she might prevent. After I resigned from the NSA, she continued, I spent 2 years in therapy trying to understand how someone trained to protect people could become so focused on technical objectives that human costs became secondary considerations. I learned that the confidence required to make high-stakes decisions can become dangerous when it's not balanced by doubt, by fear, by the willingness to question whether you're choosing the right course of action. Rodriguez realized that Elena's apparent hesitation wasn't weakness, it was the result of hard-earned wisdom about the human cost of technical decisions. She'd learned to doubt herself because her previous certainty had been lethal. The irony, Elena said, is that my current expertise in quantum interference comes partly from studying my own mistakes. I spent years analyzing exactly how my intervention in that European facility caused unintended casualties, learning to predict and prevent the electromagnetic effects that killed those children. She touched her tablet screen, but instead of activating intervention protocols, she began running predictive models, calculating not just how to stop the cascade failure, but how to minimize any unintended consequences. You know what scares me most about this situation? Elena asked, her fingers flying across the tablet's interface. It's that part of me wants to prove I can fix this. Part of me wants to demonstrate that I've learned from my mistakes, that I can be the technical expert who saves the day without causing collateral damage. And that's bad because wanting to prove yourself is exactly the mindset that leads to overlooking variables that don't fit your preferred solution. The children who died in Eastern Europe weren't killed by malice or incompetence. They were killed by someone who was so confident in her technical abilities that she didn't question whether her solution might have consequences she hadn't considered. Elena's tablet displayed a new analysis, a comprehensive assessment of every electromagnetic sensitive device within a 50-mile radius of Blackwater Ridge, every medical facility with quantum-enhanced equipment, every civilian system that could be affected by the kind of intervention she was capable of implementing. Dr. Nakamura, Richardson said, watching her work, are you calculating how to stop this cascade failure safely? Elena's expression was grim but determined. I'm calculating how to stop it without becoming the kind of person who killed children because technical elegance mattered more than human complexity. The question hanging in the monitoring station was whether Elena's hard-earned caution would prevent her from acting when action was desperately needed, or whether her experience with tragic consequences would enable her to find a solution that her younger, more confident self never could have achieved. Outside, the cascade failure continued spreading, and Elena Nakamura wrestled with the most difficult decision of her career, whether to trust herself with the kind of power that had already cost 12 innocent lives. The monitoring station's door burst open with enough force to rattle the reinforced glass windows. Colonel Marcus Webb stormed in, his face flushed with anger and desperation, followed by Dr. Patricia Hendricks and a cluster of senior staff who looked like they'd just witnessed the end of the world. What the hell is she still doing here? Webb demanded, pointing at Elena as if she were a piece of malfunctioning equipment. I thought we relocated all non-essential personnel to safe areas. Major Rodriguez stepped between Webb and Elena, her voice carefully controlled. Sir, Dr. Nakamura has been providing technical analysis of the cascade failure. Her insights have been... Her insights? Webb's voice cracked with hysteria. Her insights? The woman's a kindergarten teacher with a fake ID who's been playing with equipment she doesn't understand. Meanwhile, my facility is melting down. We've lost contact with 6 major installations, and the Pentagon is screaming for answers I don't have. Elena remained seated at her workstation, her fingers still moving across the tablet interface as she refined her safety calculations. She didn't look up when Webb entered, didn't acknowledge his accusation, didn't defend herself. Her silence seemed to enrage him further. Look at me when I'm talking to you, Webb shouted. Do you have any idea what you've caused here? Your interference with our security protocols has compromised our entire response capability. This finally got Elena's attention. She turned slowly in her chair, her expression still calm, but with an edge that hadn't been there before. My interference? Dr. Hendricks analyzed your tablet's electromagnetic emissions, Webb continued, his voice rising. Your unauthorized equipment has been broadcasting signals that interfered with our quantum stabilization attempts. Whatever amateur hour operation you're running here has made the situation worse. Dr. Hendricks stepped forward, holding a handheld scanner that was beeping ominously. The electromagnetic signature from her device is completely off the charts. We've never seen anything like it outside of classified weapons testing. Elena glanced at her tablet, then back at Hendricks with something approaching amusement. Dr. Hendricks, you're detecting quantum entanglement resonance, not interference. My equipment is synchronized with the facility systems to monitor the cascade failure in real time. Synchronized how? Hendricks demanded. Nobody gave you access to our quantum monitoring network. You couldn't possibly have authorization to. She doesn't need authorization, interrupted a new voice from the doorway. General Harrison Foster had arrived in person, his Pentagon-issued uniform pristine, despite the chaos surrounding them. He stepped into the monitoring station with the bearing of someone accustomed to taking control of impossible situations. General Foster, Webb began, relief evident in his voice. Thank God you're here. This civilian has been what, Colonel? Foster's voice carried the kind of authority that made field-grade officers reconsider their life choices. Has been trying to prevent your facility from triggering a continental infrastructure collapse while you and your staff argued about proper protocols. Webb stared at the general in confusion. Sir, I don't understand. This woman is clearly not qualified to. Dr. Elena Nakamura, Foster said, looking directly at Elena, former Agent Nakamura, Special Projects Division, the architect of our current quantum defense protocols and the leading expert on weaponized electromagnetic interference in the Western Hemisphere. The monitoring station fell completely silent. Webb's face went through several color changes as the implications hit him. Dr. Hendricks stared at Elena with dawning horror, realizing that she'd been questioning the qualifications of someone whose expertise exceeded her own by several orders of magnitude. Furthermore, Foster continued, Dr. Nakamura has been operating under deep cover classification for the past 3 years. Her presence at this facility isn't coincidental. She was positioned here specifically because intelligence indicated this type of attack was inevitable. Elena finally spoke, her voice carrying undertones of steel that hadn't been present before. General Foster, with respect, my cover wasn't designed to withstand this level of public exposure. Your cover was blown the moment you accessed NSA quantum monitoring protocols, Foster replied. At this point, operational security is less important than preventing 40 million casualties. Webb found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. 40 million casualties? Foster turned to address the assembled staff, his expression grim. What's happening at Blackwater Ridge isn't an isolated incident. It's the opening move in a coordinated attack on quantum-sensitive infrastructure. Across North America, Dr. Nakamura identified the threat pattern 4 hours ago. But apparently her warnings were dismissed because she looked like someone's grandmother instead of a weapons specialist. The accusation hit Webb like a physical blow. He looked around the room at his staff, seeing the same realization dawning on their faces. They'd excluded the one person who understood the crisis, dismissed the expert who could have prevented it, and ignored warnings that could have saved millions of lives. Dr. Nakamura, Foster said, I'm ordering you to implement whatever countermeasures are necessary to stop this cascade failure. Authorization level Alpha 1, presidential authority, no restrictions. Elena stood up slowly, her cartoon cat bag looking suddenly less whimsical and more like sophisticated field equipment. General, implementing countermeasures at this stage requires substantial electromagnetic intervention. The safety protocols alone will take. How long to calculate safe intervention parameters? Foster interrupted. Elena checked her tablet. Approximately 47 minutes for comprehensive safety analysis. How long until cascade failure reaches civilian population centers? Elena's face went pale. 18 minutes. Foster's expression didn't change, but everyone in the room could feel the weight of impossible mathematics. Safe intervention required more time than they had. Immediate intervention risked the kind of collateral casualties that had ended Elena's career 3 years earlier. "Dr. Nakamura," Foster said quietly, "this is the situation we trained for. This is why you developed expertise in quantum countermeasures. This is why the agency positioned you at this facility." Elena stared at her tablet, watching cascade failure projections spread across her displays like digital wildfire. Hospitals, schools, civilian infrastructure, all about to be caught in electromagnetic chaos that would make her previous mistake look trivial by comparison. "General," she said, "if I implement emergency countermeasures without complete safety protocols, I could cause exactly the kind of casualties that you've spent 3 years learning to prevent," Foster finished. "Dr. Nakamura, you're not the same person who made mistakes in Eastern Europe. You're the person who learned from those mistakes, who developed new protocols specifically to prevent civilian casualties, who spent 3 years preparing for exactly this moment." Colonel Webb stepped forward, his face showing a mixture of desperation and newfound respect. "Dr. Nakamura, I owe you an apology. We all do. But right now, you're the only person who can prevent catastrophic loss of life. Whatever you need, whatever authority you require, you have it." Elena looked around the monitoring station at the faces watching her, some showing guilt for their earlier dismissal, others showing terror at the approaching crisis, all showing desperate hope that she could somehow solve the impossible equation of saving millions of lives without causing unintended casualties. "What I need," Elena said, her voice steady despite the impossible pressure, "is for everyone to understand that what I'm about to attempt has never been tried before. The countermeasures I'm going to implement are theoretical applications of quantum interference principles that exist only in computer models." "Meaning?" Dr. Hendricks asked. Elena's expression was grim but determined. "Meaning that in approximately 15 minutes, we're all going to find out whether 3 years of studying my mistakes prepared me to prevent the worst technological disaster in human history, or whether I'm about to repeat those mistakes on a scale that makes 12 casualties look like acceptable losses." The weight of 40 million potential casualties settled over the monitoring station like a suffocating blanket. Elena Nakamura, the quiet woman with the Hello Kitty keychain, who'd been dismissed as unqualified just hours earlier, was about to bear responsibility for preventing or causing the greatest civilian catastrophe in modern history. And she had 14 minutes to decide whether her hard-earned wisdom was sufficient to overcome the impossible mathematics of saving everyone. The moment that changed everything came not from the cascade failure warnings flashing across Elena's screens, but from a small notification that appeared in the corner of her tablet display. A priority medical alert from Blackwater Ridge's family housing complex. Elena's blood went cold as she read the message. Emergency medical response required. 7-year-old Jessica Martinez experiencing cardiac distress. Pacemaker device showing irregular function, possibly related to electromagnetic interference. Jessica Martinez, the daughter of security guard Tommy Martinez, the man who'd questioned Elena's credentials at the facility entrance just hours earlier. The little girl who'd been perfectly healthy that morning was now experiencing life-threatening cardiac complications. because of electromagnetic fluctuations from the cascade. Failure. Elena had the power to stop. "General Foster," Elena said, her voice cutting through the heated discussion between military personnel. "We have our first civilian casualty." The monitoring station fell silent as Elena displayed the medical alert on the main screen. The little girl's medical data showed dangerous irregularities in her pacemaker function. The kind of electromagnetic interference effects that Elena had spent 3 years studying. The kind that had haunted her dreams since Eastern Europe. "How long does she have?" Foster asked grimly. Elena's fingers flew across her tablet, correlating the medical data with cascade failure projections. At current interference levels, maybe 20 minutes before complete pacemaker failure. But if the cascade reaches the civilian power grid... She paused, her face pale. 6 minutes until her life support systems are completely compromised. Major Rodriguez watched Elena's expression change as the impossible mathematics became personal. This wasn't theoretical anymore. There was a specific child with a name and a face, whose life depended on Elena's decision in the next few minutes. "Dr. Nakamura," Colonel Webb said, his earlier hostility replaced by desperate urgency. "Can your countermeasures save her?" Elena stared at the medical readings, seeing patterns that connected directly to her own tragic experience. A child with a medical device. Electromagnetic interference. The potential for Elena's intervention to either save or kill an innocent life. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Emergency countermeasures will stop the cascade failure, which should stabilize her pacemaker. But the electromagnetic pulse generated by quantum field realignment could cause temporary disruption of medical devices in a 3-mile radius." "Temporary disruption," Dr. Hendricks repeated. "What does that mean for someone with a pacemaker?" Elena's voice was barely audible. "It means there's a 30-second window where every electronic medical device in the area will experience complete shutdown. Most patients can survive 30 seconds without artificial cardiac regulation. Most, but not all." The weight of Elena's choice crystallized with brutal clarity. Inaction meant certain death for Jessica Martinez and eventual death for millions more as the cascade failure spread. Action meant probable survival for Jessica and everyone else, but possible death during the 30-second vulnerability window for patients whose medical conditions couldn't tolerate any interruption in device function. Elena's tablet chimed with another medical alert. Then another. The electromagnetic interference was spreading faster than projected, affecting more sensitive devices throughout the civilian areas surrounding Blackwater Ridge. "Multiple medical device irregularities reported," Elena announced, her voice steady despite the growing crisis. "Mrs. Sarah Chun, insulin pump malfunction. Robert Williams, cochlear implant failure. David Parker, deep brain stimulator showing intermittent connection issues." Foster stepped closer to Elena's workstation. "How many people are we talking about?" Elena ran a rapid calculation. Current count, 17 individuals with electromagnetic sensitive medical devices showing interference effects. Projected count if cascade failure reaches full civilian infrastructure, approximately 400 people in immediate danger, with cascade effects potentially affecting thousands more across the region. Another alert appeared on Elena's screen, this one from the base medical facility. Emergency medical teams were being overwhelmed by patients experiencing device malfunctions. The cascade failure wasn't waiting for Elena's decision, it was creating casualties with every minute of delay. "Dr. Nakamura," came a new voice from the monitoring station's communication system. Dr. Sarah Chun, the base medical officer, was calling in from the emergency medical center. "I need you to know that we have 3 patients in critical condition due to electromagnetic interference with life support systems. If this cascade failure continues to spread, we're looking at complete medical system collapse within the hour." Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of decision pressing down on her like a physical force. She could see Jessica Martinez's face in her mind, a 7-year-old girl she'd never met but whose life hung in the balance of Elena's choice. She could see the faces of the 12 children who died in Eastern Europe, casualties of her previous confidence in technical solutions. "General," Elena said, "I need you to understand what I'm about to attempt. The countermeasures I've developed are designed to create a controlled, electromagnetic pulse that will disrupt the cascade failure pattern. The pulse will last exactly 30 seconds, during which time every electronic device within a 3-mile radius will experience complete shutdown." "Including medical devices," Foster said. "Including medical devices. Most patients can survive 30 seconds without electronic support. Most, but not all. I've calculated a 97% survival probability for patients currently experiencing electromagnetic interference." Rodriguez felt sick. "And the other 3%? Elena's voice was steady, professional, but her hands were trembling. "The other 3% represents patients whose medical conditions require absolutely continuous electronic support. Based on current medical alerts, that's approximately 3 individuals who might not survive the countermeasure pulse." The monitoring station filled with the sound of alarms as more systems throughout Blackwater Ridge began failing. Elena's displays showed cascade failure spreading beyond the facility boundaries, beginning to affect civilian infrastructure in nearby communities. "Dr. Nakamura," Foster said quietly, "what's the survival probability if you don't implement countermeasures?" Elena's mathematical analysis was ruthless in its precision. 0% survival for current medical device patients. Complete infrastructure collapse within 40 minutes. Estimated civilian casualties in the thousands within 6 hours. Potentially millions if the cascade reaches major population centers. The choice had become stark: implement countermeasures that would save hundreds of thousands of lives but might cost 3 lives. Or allow certain catastrophic failure that would cost exponentially more lives through inaction. Elena stood up from her workstation. Her cartoon cat bag transformed from whimsical accessory to emergency equipment kit. She began pulling out devices that looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie: quantum field generators, electromagnetic pulse coordinators, and monitoring equipment that could track the effects of her intervention in real time. "If I do this," Elena said, "I need medical teams standing by for immediate intervention during the 30-second pulse window. Every patient with a critical medical device needs manual backup support during countermeasure implementation." Dr. Chun's voice came through the communication system again. "Manual backup protocols are already in place. All critical patients are being monitored by medical personnel with hand-powered emergency equipment. We're as ready as we can be." Elena activated her quantum field generators, and the monitoring station filled with a low humming sound that seemed to vibrate through the walls. Her displays showed real-time quantum field measurements as she began calibrating the countermeasure pulse. 30 seconds, she said, more to herself than to anyone else. 30 seconds to either save everyone or repeat the worst mistake of my career. General Foster placed a hand on Elena's shoulder. "Dr. Nakamura, this isn't Eastern Europe. You're not the same person who made decisions based on incomplete information. You've spent 3 years preparing for exactly this moment." Elena looked at her displays, showing Jessica Martinez's deteriorating cardiac function, the spreading cascade failure, and the hundreds of thousands of people whose lives depended on her next decision. She thought about the 12 children who died because of her previous intervention, and the millions who might die if she failed to act now. The choice was no longer between action and inaction. It was between accepting responsibility for the consequences of necessary action, or accepting responsibility for the consequences of paralyzing fear. Elena Nakamura, former kindergarten teacher, former NSA agent, current guardian of impossible decisions, placed her finger over the activation sequence that would determine whether her expertise could overcome her trauma, or whether the fear of causing harm would prevent her from preventing catastrophe. The cascade failure continued spreading. Jessica Martinez's pacemaker continued failing, and Elena prepared to discover whether 3 years of studying her mistakes had prepared her to save everyone, or whether the ghosts of 12 children would claim millions more lives through her. Hesitation to act. Elena's finger touched the activation sequence, and the transformation was immediate and startling. The woman who had spent hours being dismissed and underestimated vanished, replaced by someone whose competence was so absolute it seemed to alter the physics of the room around her. Her movements became fluid and precise as she interfaced with equipment that Major Rodriguez now realized was far more sophisticated than anything Blackwater Ridge possessed. Elena's cartoon cat bag had been completely repurposed, revealing itself as a portable command center containing technology that looked like it belonged in a science fiction film rather than a military facility. Quantum field stabilization initiating, Elena announced, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had performed similar operations under conditions that would break most people. All personnel maintain current positions. Do not touch any electronic devices for the next 2 minutes. The monitoring station's displays lit up with data streams that moved too fast for anyone except Elena to follow. Her hands moved across multiple interfaces simultaneously, conducting what appeared to be an orchestra of electromagnetic frequencies with the kind of precision that suggested years of experience with technology that officially didn't exist. Dr. Richardson watched in fascination as Elena coordinated quantum field adjustments across multiple frequency ranges while simultaneously monitoring medical device status throughout the facility. Her mental processing speed was extraordinary. She was tracking dozens of variables in real time, making calculations that would normally require supercomputer assistance, and maintaining perfect coordination between systems that had never been designed to work together. Dr. Nakamura, Captain Thompson said, "How are you controlling the facility's quantum generators from your equipment? Those systems aren't connected to external networks." Elena glanced up from her displays without pausing in her work. "Quantum entanglement doesn't require traditional network connections, Captain. When you understand the underlying mathematics, you can create resonance patterns that influence quantum states across significant distances." The casual way she explained, manipulating quantum physics, made Thompson feel like he was watching someone discuss basic arithmetic. Elena wasn't just using advanced technology. She was demonstrating mastery of scientific principles that most people couldn't even pronounce correctly. "Field stabilization at 60%. Elena reported. "Medical device interference declining across all monitored patients." Jessica Martinez's pacemaker showing improved regulation patterns. Rodriguez watched Elena's displays and realized she was monitoring every electromagnetic sensitive medical device within a 5-mile radius of Blackwater Ridge. The data resolution was incredible. Elena could track individual pacemaker rhythms, insulin pump delivery rates, and cochlear implant signal quality in real time from her portable equipment. "How is this possible?" Dr. Hendricks whispered. "Our best monitoring systems can't achieve this level of precision." Elena's expression remained focused on her work, but there was a hint of something that might have been satisfaction in her voice. "Different problems require different solutions. Dr. Hendricks, when you've spent 3 years developing countermeasures for electromagnetic warfare, you learn to build equipment that can do things traditional systems can't achieve." The most striking aspect of Elena's performance wasn't the advanced technology, it was her absolute competence in wielding it. Every movement was economical and purposeful. Every decision was made with the confidence of someone who understood exactly what would happen when specific parameters were adjusted. She worked with the fluid efficiency of a master craftsperson, using tools that had been designed specifically for her hands. Cascade failure containment at 75%, Elena announced. Initiating secondary stabilization protocols. General Foster stepped closer to Elena's workstation, his expression showing a mixture of relief and amazement. Dr. Nakamura, your equipment capabilities exceed anything in our current inventory. What classification level are we looking at here? Elena's pause was almost imperceptible before she answered. Quantum Alpha classification, General. Some of these systems are prototypes that exist only in Special Projects Division. Prototypes that you designed, Foster said. It wasn't a question. Prototypes that I helped develop for situations exactly like this one, Elena confirmed. The electromagnetic countermeasure systems were built specifically to address weaponized quantum interference without causing the kind of collateral damage that conventional approaches might produce. Rodriguez realized that Elena hadn't just been hiding her identity, she'd been concealing capabilities that were years ahead of anything the military officially possessed. The quiet woman with the Hello Kitty keychain was demonstrating technology that redefined what was possible in electromagnetic warfare. Stabilization approaching 90%, Elena reported. All critical medical devices showing normal function. Cascade failure containment successful across primary infrastructure. As Elena worked, Colonel Webb found himself recalculating everything he'd assumed about both Elena and the situation they'd been facing. The woman he'd dismissed as an unqualified civilian was performing operations that exceeded the capabilities of his entire technical staff combined. Her equipment was more advanced than systems he'd seen in classified Pentagon demonstrations. Her expertise covered areas of quantum physics that most people didn't know existed. Dr. Nakamura, Webb said quietly, when you said you had experience with similar interference patterns, you weren't talking about academic research, were you? Elena's hands never paused in their work, but her voice carried undertones that hadn't been there before. Colonel, over the past 7 years, there have been 12 documented attempts to use weaponized electromagnetic interference against civilian infrastructure in various countries. This is the 13th. The implications hit everyone in the monitoring station simultaneously. Elena hadn't just studied electromagnetic warfare in theory. She'd been actively preventing it around the world for years. Her expertise wasn't academic. It was operational, earned through direct confrontation with exactly the kind of attack they were experiencing. You've stopped attacks like this before, Richardson said, beginning to understand the scope of Elena's actual background. I've prevented most of them from reaching the deployment stage, Elena replied. This is the first time someone has managed to initiate full cascade failure before countermeasures could be implemented. Her casual mention of preventing global terrorist attacks made Rodriguez realized that Elena's kindergarten teacher persona had been concealing not just advanced technical skills, but operational experience in preventing exactly the kind of catastrophic events that intelligence agencies spent billions of dollars trying to detect before they happened. Quantum field stabilization complete, Elena announced. All systems showing normal operational parameters. Medical device function restored across all monitored patients. The relief in the monitoring station was palpable. Elena had not only stopped the cascade failure but had done so without causing the medical device disruptions that had terrified her. Her countermeasures had been precisely calibrated to address the electromagnetic interference without creating the secondary effects that had haunted her since Eastern Europe. Dr. Nakamura. Dr. Chun's voice came through the communication system. All patients are stable. Jessica Martinez's pacemaker is functioning normally. No adverse effects detected from the countermeasure implementation. Elena leaned back in her chair for the first time since beginning her intervention, and everyone in the room could see the emotional weight lifting from her shoulders. She had successfully used her advanced capabilities without causing the kind of unintended casualties that had driven her from active duty. But as Elena began shutting down her emergency systems, her displays showed something that made her expression change from relief to concern. The quantum interference attack they just neutralized wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a coordinated pattern of attacks that were still active across multiple locations. "General Foster," Elena said, her voice taking on the crisp authority of someone accustomed to briefing senior officials on matters of national security. "We have a problem. The Blackwater Ridge attack was a diversion, while we were focused on stopping the cascade failure here. Similar attacks have been initiated at 17 other facilities across North America." Elena's display showed a continent-wide map with blinking red indicators at locations that represented critical infrastructure nodes. The attack they'd just defeated had been successful in its real objective, keeping Elena occupied while the main assault unfolded elsewhere. "Dr. Nakamura," Foster said, "can your countermeasures be deployed to multiple locations simultaneously?" Elena studied her tactical displays, calculating response scenarios with the rapid precision of someone who'd spent years preparing for exactly this type of multi-vector attack. Her answer would determine whether her demonstration of advanced capabilities at Blackwater Ridge had been an isolated success or the opening move in a much larger operation. The kindergarten teacher with the cartoon keychain had just revealed herself as one of the most advanced quantum warfare specialists in the world. But her most difficult challenges were just beginning. The transformation of the monitoring station was so complete that Major Rodriguez felt like she was witnessing the emergence of an entirely different facility. Elena had activated what she called network command protocol, and suddenly Blackwater Ridge became the central hub for coordinating electromagnetic countermeasures across an entire continent. Elena's portable equipment had somehow interfaced with the facility's main computers, creating a command center that displayed real-time quantum field data from 17 locations simultaneously. The wall-mounted screens showed a tactical overview that looked like something from a Pentagon war room, with Elena coordinating response operations across thousands of miles with the calm efficiency of someone who'd done this many times before. "Dr. Nakamura," General Foster said, watching Elena manage multiple crisis situations simultaneously, "I need to understand the scope of your capabilities. What exactly are we looking at here?" Elena's hands moved across multiple interfaces as she spoke, never breaking rhythm in her coordination of continental defense operations. "General, what you're seeing is the activation of the Quantum Defense Grid, a network of monitoring and countermeasure systems that I've been building and refining for the past 7 years." Dr. Richardson stared at the displays showing real-time data from facilities across North America. "You built a continental defense network? How is that possible without congressional authorization or budget allocation?" Elena's smile was slight but unmistakably satisfied. "Dr. Richardson, the most effective defense systems are the ones that potential enemies don't know exist. The Quantum Defense Grid was designed to be completely invisible until the moment it's needed." As Elena worked, her true expertise became undeniable. She was simultaneously managing electromagnetic countermeasures at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory in California, the Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory in Illinois, and the Brookhaven National Laboratory in New York, while coordinating with response teams at 14 other critical facilities. Each location required different countermeasure approaches based on their specific quantum systems and electromagnetic vulnerabilities. Elena adapted her protocols in real time, modifying quantum field parameters for each facility's unique requirements while maintaining overall network stability across the continent. Brookhaven showing successful containment, Elena reported. Barclay requiring secondary intervention protocols. Fermilab cascade failure reduced to manageable levels. Estimated time to complete network stabilization, 47 minutes. Captain Thompson watched Elena coordinate operations that should have required dozens of specialists working with supercomputer support. She was performing calculations, managing communications, and implementing technical solutions across multiple time zones with a level of competence that redefined what he thought was humanly possible. Dr. Nakamura, Thompson said, "How are you maintaining communication with all these facilities simultaneously? Our standard military communications don't have this kind of range or bandwidth." Elena paused just long enough to activate another subsystem on her equipment. "Captain, quantum entanglement allows for instantaneous communication across any distance. When you understand the underlying physics, you can create communication networks that don't rely on traditional electromagnetic transmission." The casual way Elena discussed manipulating the fundamental laws of physics made everyone in the monitoring station realize they were witnessing capabilities that exceeded anything in current scientific literature. Elena wasn't just using advanced technology. She was demonstrating mastery of quantum mechanics that appeared to be decades ahead of known research. Colonel Webb found himself completely recalibrating his understanding of Elena's background and qualifications. The woman he'd dismissed as an unqualified civilian was coordinating defense operations that protected the entire North American power grid, communication infrastructure, and research capability. "Dr. Nakamura," Webb said quietly, "when you resigned from the NSA 3 years ago, did they know you were continuing to develop these capabilities?" Elena's expression became more guarded. "Colonel, there are certain projects that transcend normal organizational boundaries. The quantum defense grid was developed with the understanding that electromagnetic warfare represents an existential threat to modern civilization." "Developed by whom?" General Foster asked. "By people who understood that traditional military and intelligence structures weren't equipped to address quantum-level threats," Elena replied. "The network exists because some problems are too important to be limited by bureaucratic constraints." As Elena continued her work, the scope of her achievement became increasingly clear. She had single-handedly created a defense system that protected critical infrastructure across an entire continent. Her kindergarten teacher persona had been cover for developing and maintaining technology that was arguably more important to national security than any official military program. "All Eastern Seaboard facilities showing stabilization," Elena announced. "West Coast facilities requiring coordinated intervention in 17 minutes. Preparing synchronized countermeasure deployment." Dr. Hendricks watched Elena coordinate what appeared to be the most sophisticated military operation she'd ever witnessed, all managed from a monitoring station by someone whose existence didn't appear in any official records. "Dr. Nakamura," Hendricks said, "the level of coordination you're achieving should require hundreds of personnel and massive computational resources. How are you managing this alone?" Elena looked up from her displays with an expression that was both patient and slightly amused. "Dr. Hendricks, when you spend 3 years studying every possible failure mode of quantum-based systems, you develop solutions that most people would consider impossible. The network was designed specifically to be operated by a single individual with sufficient understanding of quantum field dynamics." Elena activated what she called West Coast Protocol, and the monitoring station filled with displays showing simultaneous countermeasure operations across California, Oregon, and Washington. She was coordinating quantum field adjustments at 9 facilities while monitoring electromagnetic effects across millions of square miles. "Stanford Linear Accelerator showing successful intervention," Elena reported. Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, requiring modified protocols due to geological electromagnetic variations. Los Alamos, implementing emergency stabilization procedures. Major Rodriguez realized that Elena was casually referencing facilities and operations that represented billions of dollars in research infrastructure and national security assets. The quiet woman with the Hello Kitty keychain was protecting resources that were critical to America's scientific and military capabilities. Dr. Nakamura, Rodriguez said, "You're coordinating defense operations for the entire continental United States. That level of authority and capability, who authorized this network?" Elena's hands never paused in their work, but her voice carried undertones of steel that made everyone understand they were dealing with someone who operated at levels of government that most people didn't know existed. "Major, there are situations where waiting for authorization means accepting casualties that could be prevented by immediate action. The quantum defense grid exists because some threats require responses that transcend normal command structures." As Elena completed the West Coast stabilization sequence, her displays showed a continental map with all 17 attack sites neutralized. The coordinated electromagnetic assault that could have crippled North American infrastructure had been defeated by a single individual operating from a military facility that most people had never heard of. "Network stabilization complete," Elena announced. "All facilities showing normal operational parameters. Continental quantum infrastructure secured." The monitoring station fell silent as everyone absorbed what they'd just witnessed. Elena Nakamura had single-handedly defeated a coordinated attack on critical infrastructure across an entire continent. Her capabilities exceeded anything in official military or intelligence programs. Her technology was years ahead of anything they'd imagined possible. But perhaps most remarkably, Elena had achieved all of this while maintaining her cover as a former kindergarten teacher with a cartoon keychain. The most sophisticated defense operation in modern history had been conducted by someone whose existence was so carefully concealed that until today, no one at Blackwater Ridge had suspected she was anything more than an academic with unusual security clearance. General Foster stepped forward, his expression showing a mixture of relief, amazement, and growing concern about the implications of what Elena had revealed. "Dr. Nakamura," Foster said, "you've just demonstrated capabilities that redefine what we thought was possible in electromagnetic warfare. But I need to ask, if you've been operating this defense network for years, what other threats have you been protecting us from that we don't know about?" Elena looked at the displays showing the defeated attack pattern, then at the faces of people who were beginning to understand that their assumptions about threats, defenses, and the people who protected them had been fundamentally incorrect. "General," Elena said quietly, "today's attack was the 13th attempt to weaponize quantum interference against civilian infrastructure. You stopped knowing about the other 12 because they were neutralized before they could cause detectable effects." The implication was staggering. Elena had been secretly protecting the continent from electromagnetic warfare for years, preventing attacks that could have caused catastrophic casualties, maintaining security that government agencies didn't know existed. Elena Nakamura, the dismissed kindergarten teacher, had just proven that she was arguably the most important person in North American defense infrastructure. And everyone in the monitoring station was beginning to realize that they still had no idea how deep her capabilities actually went. General Foster activated the monitoring station's secure communication system, and within minutes, the wall displays showed the faces of people whose names appeared in classified briefings that most military personnel would never see. The Secretary of Defense, the Director of National Intelligence, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and several individuals whose titles were simply listed as Special Advisor with no other identification. "Ladies and gentlemen," Foster began, "I'm calling this emergency briefing to discuss the individual who just prevented what could have been the most catastrophic infrastructure attack in American history, Dr. Elena Nakamura." I believe it's time for complete disclosure." Elena looked at the assembled faces on the screens, then at the military personnel in the monitoring station who were about to learn just how fundamentally their understanding of national security had been incomplete. She reached into her cartoon cat bag one final time, withdrawing a device that looked like nothing anyone had ever seen before. "What you're about to hear," Elena said, "is classified at levels that most of you don't have clearance for. But given today's events, full disclosure has become necessary." The device projected a holographic display that filled the monitoring station with three-dimensional data structures showing global electromagnetic threat assessments, quantum field vulnerabilities across 6 continents, and defense network architectures that spanned multiple countries. "My name is Dr. Elena Nakamura," she began, "but that identity was created 7 years ago. Before that, I was Dr. Elena Rodriguez-Chen, the principal architect of the Global Quantum Defense Initiative, a joint project between the United States, Canada, the European Union, Japan, and Australia to defend against weaponized quantum technologies." Major Rodriguez felt like the floor had shifted beneath her feet. Elena wasn't just an NSA agent. She was apparently involved in international defense operations that exceeded anything she'd imagined existed. "The quantum defense grid you witnessed today," Elena continued, "is the North American component of a global defense network that monitors and counters electromagnetic warfare across 5 continents. The network exists because traditional military and intelligence structures were inadequate to address threats that could disable entire civilizations within hours." Dr. Richardson stared at the holographic displays showing defense installations across the globe. "Dr. Nakamura, you're describing a level of international coordination that would require treaties, massive budgets, and approval from dozens of governments. How is this possible?" Elena's expression became more serious. "Dr. Richardson, sometimes the survival of modern civilization requires cooperation that transcends normal political boundaries. The Global Quantum Defense Initiative exists because the alternative is accepting that electromagnetic warfare could return humanity to pre-industrial conditions within a matter of days." Secretary of Defense Patricia Morrison spoke from the communication screen, her voice carrying the weight of someone who just learned that critical defense operations had been occurring without her knowledge. "Dr. Nakamura, are you telling us that you've been operating international defense networks without oversight from any government?" "I'm telling you that 5 governments jointly authorized the development of defense capabilities that could protect their populations from threats that conventional military structures couldn't address," Elena replied. "The oversight exists, but it operates through channels that were designed to be invisible to normal intelligence operations." Elena activated another function on her holographic projector, and the monitoring station filled with displays showing global threat assessments that made everyone realize how much they hadn't known about the world they thought they understood. "Over the past 7 years," Elena explained, "the Global Quantum Defense Initiative has detected and neutralized 47 attempts to weaponize quantum technologies against civilian infrastructure. The attacks have originated from rogue scientific groups, criminal organizations, and state actors who understood that electromagnetic warfare could accomplish strategic objectives without traditional military engagement." Captain Thompson studied the threat assessment data with growing alarm. 47 attacks? We've never received intelligence about electromagnetic warfare threats on this scale, because the attacks were neutralized before they could cause detectable effects," Elena said. "The most successful defense operations are the ones where nobody realizes they were necessary." Elena's holographic display shifted to show personnel records, and suddenly everyone in the monitoring station was looking at information that redefined everything they thought they knew about Elena's background and qualifications. Dr. Elena Rodriguez-Chen, Ph.D. in theoretical physics from MIT, Ph.D. in electrical engineering from Stanford, former research director at Bell Laboratories, former principal scientist at DARPA's Advanced Physics Division, and designer of the quantum field manipulation technologies that made modern electromagnetic defense possible. Colonel Webb stared at Elena's actual academic credentials. You have 2 doctoral degrees from different universities, research experience at Bell Labs and DARPA, and you've published papers that are apparently classified above my clearance level. 43 published papers on quantum field dynamics, electromagnetic warfare countermeasures, and defensive applications of quantum entanglement, Elena confirmed. Most are classified, but the unclassified research has been cited over 2,000 times in peer-reviewed journals. Dr. Hendricks realized that she'd been questioning the qualifications of someone whose academic achievements exceeded those of most department heads at major research universities. Dr. Nakamura, your research background. You're one of the leading quantum physicists in the world. I was, Elena said quietly, until the incident in Eastern Europe made me realize that technical brilliance without emotional wisdom can be more dangerous than ignorance. I spent 3 years as Elena Nakamura, kindergarten teacher, learning to balance intellectual capability with human compassion. The Director of National Intelligence, Victoria Chun, spoke from the communication screen. Dr. Rodriguez Chen, we need to understand the scope of the Global Quantum Defense Initiative. How many people are involved in these operations? Elena's holographic display showed organizational charts that revealed a network of scientists, engineers, and specialists operating across multiple countries with coordination that exceeded most official international organizations. Currently, the initiative employs approximately 300 individuals across 5 continents. Elena explained. Most maintain cover identities in civilian occupations while monitoring and maintaining defense systems that protect roughly 2 billion people from electromagnetic warfare threats. Major Rodriguez felt overwhelmed by the scope of what Elena was revealing. 300 people protecting 2 billion people from threats that most governments don't know exist. The most effective protection is often invisible protection, Elena said. The initiative exists because some threats require responses that transcend normal bureaucratic processes. When electromagnetic weapons can disable entire nations within hours, defense networks need to operate faster than governmental decision-making structures allow. Elena deactivated her holographic projector and looked around the monitoring station at people who were struggling to process the magnitude of what they'd just learned. The quiet woman with the Hello Kitty keychain had revealed herself as one of the most important people in global defense operations, protecting billions of lives through technologies and organizational structures that officially didn't exist. The reason I was positioned at Blackwater Ridge, Elena continued, is that intelligence indicated this facility would be targeted for the kind of attack we experience today. My assignment was to maintain cover while monitoring for electromagnetic warfare threats and implementing countermeasures if necessary. General Foster leaned forward. Dr. Rodriguez Chun, what you've revealed raises significant questions about oversight, authority, and the relationship between official government operations and your initiative. Elena's expression became more serious. General, those are questions that will need to be addressed at levels far above this briefing. What I can tell you is that today's attack was not random. Someone with intimate knowledge of both Blackwater Ridge's capabilities and the global Quantum Defense Initiative's operational patterns orchestrated an assault designed to test our response capabilities. The implications sent a chill through everyone in the monitoring station. Elena had just revealed that the electromagnetic attack they'd experienced wasn't just an attempt to damage American infrastructure, it was reconnaissance, conducted by someone who knew enough about Elena's identity and capabilities to design a test of the world's most advanced defense systems. Dr. Rodriguez Chen, Foster said. Are you saying that someone knows about the Global Quantum Defense Initiative and is actively probing our capabilities? Elena looked at the displays showing the defeated attack pattern, then at the faces of people who were beginning to understand that what they'd experienced was not an ending, but a beginning. General, Elena said quietly, what happened today was a field test. Someone wanted to understand exactly how quickly and effectively the initiative could respond to coordinated electromagnetic attacks. Now they have that information. The monitoring station fell silent as everyone absorbed the terrifying implication. Elena's successful defense of North American infrastructure had revealed capabilities that could now be countered by whoever had orchestrated the test. The most sophisticated defense network in human history had just been forced to expose itself. And Elena Nakamura, the kindergarten teacher who was actually one of the world's most important defense assets, had to decide what to do. When the enemy finally understood exactly what they were fighting, the second wave came without warning. Elena's holographic displays erupted with alerts as quantum interference signals began manifesting simultaneously across 43 locations worldwide. Not the 17 facilities they just defended, but an entirely different set of targets that included civilian power grids, hospital networks, financial data centers, and communication satellites. Global attack pattern initiating, Elena announced, her voice shifting into the crisp authority of someone who'd prepared for this exact scenario. This is what they were testing for. They used our response data to calculate optimal target selection and timing windows. Major Rodriguez watched Elena's displays light up with threat indicators spanning 6 continents. The scope was staggering: hospitals in London, power grids in Tokyo, financial centers in Hong Kong, communication networks across South America. Whoever had orchestrated the test attack was now implementing a global assault that could cripple modern civilization. Dr. Rodriguez Chen, General Foster said. Can the Global Quantum Defense Initiative respond to this scale of attack? Elena's hands were already moving across her interfaces, activating systems that transformed the monitoring station into a global command center. General, this is exactly what the initiative was designed for. But coordinating 43 simultaneous countermeasures while maintaining precision sufficient to prevent civilian casualties, that's going to require everything we've learned over the past 7 years. Elena activated what she called Global Network Protocol, and suddenly the monitoring station was connected to defense specialists across 5 continents. The wall displays showed real-time coordination with teams in London, Tokyo, Sydney, Berlin, and Toronto, each managing regional electromagnetic countermeasures. While Elena orchestrated overall strategic response, London, team reporting critical infrastructure under attack, came a voice through the communication system. Hospital quantum imaging systems showing massive interference. We need immediate countermeasure deployment. Tokyo confirming power grid destabilization, reported another voice. Electromagnetic interference affecting 30 million people. Requesting authorization for emergency protocols. Elena's response was immediate and decisive. London team, implement medical priority protocol with 15-second electromagnetic pulse windows. Tokyo team, coordinate with regional power authorities for controlled grid shutdown during countermeasure deployment. All teams, remember we're dealing with adversaries who know our response patterns. Expect secondary attacks designed to exploit our countermeasure timing. Dr. Richardson watched Elena co-coordinate global defense operations with a level of competence that redefined what he thought was humanly possible. She was simultaneously managing electromagnetic countermeasures across 6 time zones, coordinating with civilian authorities in multiple countries, and adapting her strategies in real time as the attacking forces demonstrated knowledge of her own defense protocols. Berlin team requesting guidance on financial network protection, came another voice. Attackers are using modified interference patterns that don't match our predicted models. Elena studied the attack data flowing in from Berlin, her expression showing the focused concentration of someone solving equations that could determine the fate of millions. Berlin team, the modified patterns are designed to trigger our standard countermeasures, which will create windows of vulnerability for secondary attacks. Implement variable frequency protocol, instead let them think their modifications are working while we track their adaptation. Algorithms. Captain Thompson realized he was witnessing what might be the most sophisticated military operation in human history, conducted by someone whose existence hadn't been officially acknowledged until hours earlier. Elena was fighting a technological war across multiple continents while simultaneously protecting civilian populations from her own defensive weapons. Hong Kong confirming successful countermeasure deployment, reported a team leader. Financial networks secured with minimal disruption. Standing by for secondary wave detection. Sydney reporting power grid stabilization complete, came another update. No civilian casualties detected from electromagnetic countermeasures. Elena's expression showed relief, but her hands never paused in their coordination of global operations. All teams maintain heightened alert status. Attack pattern analysis indicates this was their primary assault, but someone with this level of coordination capability has contingency plans we haven't anticipated. Colonel Webb found himself completely recalibrating his understanding of Elena's capabilities and the threats she'd been protecting them from. The woman he'd dismissed as unqualified was conducting operations that exceeded the scope of most military campaigns, protecting billions of people from weapons that could destroy modern civilization. Dr. Rodriguez Chun, Webb said. The level of coordination you're achieving. How is it possible for one person to manage operations of this complexity? Elena glanced up from her displays while continuing to coordinate countermeasures across 3 continents. Colonel, the Global Quantum Defense Initiative was designed around the understanding that electromagnetic warfare requires response speeds that exceed traditional command structures. When quantum weapons can disable entire nations within minutes, defense networks need to operate at the speed of thought. Elena's holographic projector activated again, showing a global map with indicators that made everyone realize the true scope of what had just been prevented. The attack they just defeated could have disabled power grids serving 800 million people, crashed financial networks managing trillions of dollars, and disrupted medical systems supporting millions of patients worldwide. Global threat neutralization confirmed, Elena announced. All 43 targets showing normal operational parameters. Estimated casualties prevented. Approximately 15,000 deaths from medical system failures, 200,000 injuries from infrastructure collapse, and economic damage exceeding $2 trillion. The monitoring station fell silent as everyone absorbed the magnitude of what Elena had just accomplished. She had single-handedly coordinated the defense of modern civilization against an attack that could have returned multiple continents to pre-industrial conditions, but Elena's expression wasn't one of triumph, it was one of deep concern as she studied data that apparently revealed something troubling about the attack patterns they just defeated. Dr. Rodriguez Chun, General Foster said. You've just prevented what might have been the greatest catastrophe in human history. But you look like someone who's discovered bad news. Elena deactivated her global coordination systems and turned to face the assembled officials, her expression grave. General, the attack we just defeated was too sophisticated. The coordination, the timing, the knowledge of our response protocols. This wasn't developed by a rogue organization or criminal network. What are you saying? Dr. Hendricks asked. Elena's holographic display showed attack signature analysis that revealed coordination patterns, technological capabilities, and strategic planning that exceeded what non-governmental organizations could achieve. I'm saying that whoever orchestrated this attack had access to information about the global quantum defense initiative that should have been impossible to obtain. They knew our personnel locations, our response protocols, and our defensive capabilities with precision that suggests inside knowledge. Major Rodriguez felt a chill as the implications became clear. You're saying someone with access to the initiative's classified information orchestrated this attack? I'm saying that someone with intimate knowledge of our most sensitive operations just tested our entire global defense network, Elena replied. They now know exactly how we respond to electromagnetic warfare, what our capabilities are, and what our limitations might be. Elena activated one final analysis program, and her display showed correlation patterns that revealed the most troubling possibility of all. Furthermore, the attack pattern suggests this wasn't just reconnaissance. It was preparation for something larger, something that would require precise knowledge of our defensive capabilities to successfully implement. The monitoring station filled with the sound of alarms as Elena's threat detection systems identified new interference patterns beginning to manifest across multiple continents. But these weren't the broad-spectrum attacks they just defeated. These were precise, targeted interventions designed to exploit the exact defensive responses Elena had just demonstrated. Dr. Rodriguez-Chen, Foster said, are you telling us that our successful defense just gave them the information they needed to plan something worse? Elena looked at the emerging threat patterns with the grim recognition of someone who'd spent 7 years preparing for exactly this scenario. General, what we just prevented was the opening move. Now they know exactly how the Global Quantum Defense Initiative operates, and they're about to show us what they learned. Elena Nakamura, the kindergarten teacher who'd revealed herself as one of the most important people in global defense, had just achieved the greatest victory in the history of electromagnetic warfare. But her success had exposed capabilities that could now be turned against the very people she'd spent 7 years protecting. The real battle was about to begin, and Elena was no longer fighting from the shadows. 6 months after the electromagnetic warfare crisis that had nearly crippled global civilization, Elena Rodriguez-Chen stood in front of a classroom that looked nothing like the kindergarten where she'd once taught basic counting and alphabet recognition. The Global Quantum Defense Academy, housed in a repurposed facility adjacent to Blackwater Ridge, contained the most advanced electromagnetic warfare training equipment on Earth. Her students weren't 5-year-olds learning their colors. They were the next generation of quantum defense specialists, brilliant minds from 37 countries who'd been selected for their ability to understand both the technical complexities of electromagnetic warfare and the human costs of the decisions they would be authorized to make. Dr. Rodriguez-Chen asked Lieutenant Sarah Kim, a quantum physics graduate from Seoul National University, when you first detected the global attack pattern, how did you know the adversaries had inside knowledge of initiative protocols? Elena smiled, remembering how different her life had been when her biggest concern was helping children learn to tie their shoes. Now she was preparing specialists to defend against threats that could return humanity to the pre-industrial age. Lieutenant Kim, pattern recognition in electromagnetic warfare isn't just about understanding quantum field dynamics. It's about understanding human behavior, institutional vulnerabilities, and the ways that technical excellence can be undermined by personal motivations. Elena activated a holographic display that showed the attack patterns from 6 months earlier, but now overlaid with analysis that revealed the systematic exploitation of initiative response protocols. Her students physicists, engineers, and former military. Personnel from around the world studied the data with the intense focus of people who understood they were learning to prevent global catastrophe. The adversaries knew our countermeasure timing windows, our personnel deployment patterns, and our priority algorithms for civilian protection, Elena continued. That level of knowledge could only come from someone with access to our most classified operational data. Dr. Marcus Richardson, now serving as Elena's deputy director for the academy, entered the classroom with an expression of satisfaction that had become common since the revelations about Elena's true background. The man who'd once been confused by Elena's expertise now worked alongside her to develop training programs that prepared specialists for threats most people couldn't imagine. Dr. Rodriguez Chun. Richardson said, "We've received confirmation from the investigation. Former initiative coordinator Dr. Viktor Petrov has been located in a facility in Eastern Europe, along with evidence of his coordination with hostile intelligence services over the past 18 months. Elena's expression darkened. Viktor Petrov, the same person whose betrayal had forced her into hiding 7 years earlier, whose actions had led to the death of 12 children and Elena's resignation from active duty. He'd somehow infiltrated the Global Quantum Defense Initiative and used his position to orchestrate the attacks that could have killed millions. Has he been apprehended?" Elena asked. "Better than that," Richardson replied. "The Joint Task Force used modified versions of your countermeasure technologies to disable his entire operation. No casualties, complete evidence recovery, and disruption of a network that was planning even larger attacks against civilian infrastructure." Elena felt a profound sense of closure. The man whose betrayal had haunted her for 7 years had finally been stopped, not through revenge or violence, but through the careful application of defensive technologies that protected innocent people while preventing unnecessary harm. "Students," Elena said, turning back to her class, "this illustrates why the Academy exists. Technical excellence without moral wisdom can be turned against the people we're meant to protect. Our mission isn't just to develop better countermeasures, it's to ensure that the people authorized to use those countermeasures understand the human consequences of every decision they make." Major Sarah Rodriguez, now serving as Elena's liaison with traditional military structures, entered the classroom with a group of senior officials whose presence indicated the continuing evolution of Elena's role in global defense. "Dr. Rodriguez Chun," Rodriguez said, "General Foster and Secretary Morrison would like to discuss the expansion of Academy training programs to include personnel from the additional countries that have requested participation in the Global Quantum Defense Initiative." Elena looked at the faces of officials who 6 months earlier had never heard of the initiative and now considered it essential to international security. The crisis that had forced her to reveal her identity had also demonstrated the necessity of the defense network she'd been building in secret. "How many countries are we discussing?" Elena asked. 17 additional nations, including Brazil, India, South Korea, and several African Union member states, Rodriguez replied. The electromagnetic attacks 6 months ago convinced their governments that quantum defense capabilities are essential to protecting their civilian populations. Elena nodded, understanding that her exposure during the crisis had fundamentally changed the nature of her work. She was no longer a secret guardian operating from the shadows. She was the acknowledged architect of humanity's defense against electromagnetic warfare. "Students," Elena said to her class, "you're witnessing the transformation of global defense cooperation. What began as a secret network designed to operate invisibly has become an open collaboration between nations that understand the stakes of electromagnetic warfare." Colonel Marcus Webb entered the classroom, his presence a reminder of how completely perspectives had changed since the crisis. The man who'd once ordered Elena removed from decision-making processes now regularly consulted with her on matters of national security. Dr. Rodriguez Chun, Webb said. The Pentagon has approved funding for the advanced training simulator you requested. We're also establishing academy branch facilities at 3 additional locations to accommodate the increasing number of specialists requiring electromagnetic warfare defense training. Elena smiled, remembering the woman who'd hidden her capabilities behind a cartoon keychain and kindergarten teacher persona. That version of herself had been necessary, a protective camouflage that allowed her to develop defensive capabilities while learning to balance technical precision with human wisdom. The crisis had proven that some threats require responses that transcend secrecy and individual capability. The Global Quantum Defense Initiative now operated as an acknowledged international cooperation, with Elena serving as its recognized leader rather than its hidden architect. Dr. Rodriguez Chun asked Captain Jennifer Thompson, another former student who now served as an instructor, "Do you ever miss the simplicity of your cover identity? The quieter life where nobody knew who you really were?" Elena considered the question seriously. She looked around the classroom filled with brilliant minds from around the world, all dedicated to protecting civilian populations from threats that most people would never know existed. She thought about the Academy's mission to prepare specialists who combine technical excellence with moral wisdom. She remembered the satisfaction of teaching kindergarten children, but also the knowledge that her current students were learning to prevent casualties on a scale that made individual classroom achievements seem small by comparison. "Captain Thompson," Elena said finally, "I loved teaching kindergarten because helping children learn felt like building a better future. What we're doing here is building a better future for all the children those kindergarten students will someday have. The scale is different, but the purpose is the same." Elena activated a final holographic display that showed the current status of global electromagnetic threat monitoring. Green indicators across 6 continents showed peaceful conditions, protected by a network of specialists who understood both the technical requirements and human responsibilities of their mission. The woman who taught kindergarten learned that the most important education involves helping people understand how their actions affect others, Elena continued. The woman who prevented global catastrophe learned that individual capability must be balanced with collective wisdom. The woman who directs this academy understands that preparing the next generation of defenders requires both technical excellence and moral clarity. Elena looked at her students, seeing in their faces the future of global defense against threats that could reshape human civilization. Some were former military personnel who'd learned to apply electromagnetic warfare principles to protective rather than offensive purposes. Others were civilian scientists who dedicated their careers to preventing the weaponization of technologies they'd helped develop. "Your mission," Elena told them, "is to ensure that defensive capability grows faster than offensive threat development. But your responsibility is to ensure that the power to protect millions of people is only entrusted to individuals who understand that technical precision without human wisdom can be more dangerous than ignorance." As Elena concluded the day's training session, she realized that her transformation from secret guardian to acknowledged leader had created opportunities she'd never imagined. The kindergarten teacher who'd hidden her identity behind cartoon accessories had become someone who could shape global defense policy while ensuring that protective technologies remain focused on preserving rather than destroying human life. Elena Rodriguez Chun, former kindergarten teacher, former secret agent, current director of humanity's most important defense initiative, had found her authentic purpose, building a future where brilliant minds were guided by compassionate wisdom, where defensive capabilities protected rather than threatened civilian populations, and where the lessons learned from past mistakes enabled better decisions about protecting everyone's Tomorrow. The quiet woman with the Hello Kitty keychain had become the acknowledged guardian of global electromagnetic security. But her most important achievement was ensuring that future guardians would be better prepared, more wisely guided, and more humanely motivated than she had been when she'd started this journey 7 years earlier. Some heroes hide in plain sight until crisis forces them into the light. Elena's story proved that the most powerful transformations often begin with people who look like they don't belong, work in roles that seem too small for their capabilities, and prepare for challenges that others can't imagine. Real strength isn't about never being underestimated. It's about what you do when people finally see who you really are, and how you use that recognition to build something better than what existed before. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.